Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I am genuinely so excited to have you here today because we are about to jump into something truly epic. We're going to explore over 4 millennia, yes, 4,000 years of the Indian subcontinent's history. It's incredibly layered, deeply complex, and honestly, just fascinating.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just think about this number for a second, 24.4%. At its absolute peak, the Mughal Empire wasn't just controlling a huge chunk of land, it literally controlled nearly a quarter of the entire world's economy. It actually surpassed China to become the globe's largest economic power and the absolute leader in manufacturing. So you might be wondering, how on earth did a subcontinent build that kind of immense wealth, administrative scale, and cultural depth?
So, here is our game plan for today. We'll start with the Indus Valley Civilization, move through the Mauryan Empire, hit the Gupta Empire's golden age, check out the Delhi Sultanate, the Mughal Empire, and finally unpack British rule and the pivotal 1857 revolt.
Just to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the timeline we are tackling, we are traveling from 2500 BCE all the way up to 1858 CE. And as you'll see, this history, it doesn't just march in a straight, boring line. It moves in these massive, sweeping waves of epic rises, monumental cultural fusions, and really profound transformations.
Right, let's kick things off with our very first epic. We're talking about the Indus Valley Civilization, basically history's very first major urban planners.
We are starting way back in 2500 BCE. When you look at the archaeological remains of cities like Mohenjo-Daro, the civic organization is just mind-blowing. They didn't just throw up houses randomly. They meticulously planned these urban spaces. You had the citadel, which was this raised area holding all the public and administrative power. Think massive granaries and ritual spaces like the Great Bath. And then, in total contrast, you had the lower town. This was a highly organized, grid-planned residential area full of incredibly well-structured houses made out of uniform, baked bricks.
And what's really interesting about this is the sheer technological leap these people made. They engineered covered underground drainage and public sanitation systems. They literally had complex indoor plumbing before it was cool. That's a level of infrastructure unmatched anywhere else in the world for over 1,000 years. Plus, they standardized weights and measures to regulate this massive trade network that reached all the way to Mesopotamia. And get this, they built this highly functioning, super wealthy society without leaving behind any archaeological evidence of large-scale warfare. It's just wild.
Moving right along, let's fast forward a bit to the Mauryan Empire, the first real push to unify the subcontinent. So, we drop into 322 BCE. This is a huge political shift because the Mauryans were the very first power to unify almost the entirety of India. We can break this down into 3 steps. Step 1. Chandragupta Maurya comes in with just incredible military might to conquer the land and end all that regional fragmentation. Step 2. They didn't just conquer, they organized. They built a single, highly efficient system of finance, administration, and security, even laying down the Grand Trunk Road, this massive highway connecting India to Central Asia. But step 3, that's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Under Chandragupta's grandson Ashoka, the entire empire shifted gears profoundly. After witnessing the absolute horrors of war, Ashoka embraced Buddhism. He anchored his massive empire in peace, social harmony, and this really sprawling domain of moral authority.
Next up, we hit a truly spectacular era, the Gupta Empire, in what is widely known as a synthesis of power and art.
So the crucial point about the Guptas is perfectly captured by this idea. They managed to create a synthesis of power, art, and intellect, rarely seen anywhere in world history. Emerging right around 320 CE, India entered a true golden age. They had an administration that beautifully balanced central control with local autonomy, and that paved the way for staggering creativity and stability. We're talking massive leaps forward in science, like the Iron Pillar of Delhi. It features rust-resistant metallurgy so advanced that it literally still defies the elements today. And they paired that with stunning artistic achievements, like the jaw-dropping frescoes tucked inside the Ajanta caves.
All right, shifting gears again. Let's look at the Delhi Sultanate and the dawn of Indo-Islamic fusion.
As we hit the 13th century, there is a monumental cultural pivot. Starting in 1206, Central Asian Turks established the Delhi Sultanate. This was a big deal because it brought India into a much wider, globally connected Islamic world system. Over the next 300 years, you see 5 sequential dynasties ruling from Delhi: the Mamluks, Kholjis, Tughlaqs, Sayyids, and Lodis. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a change in management. These rulers ushered in a really profound and lasting syncretic fusion. It sparked a cultural renaissance that gave birth to the Urdu language and left a permanent mark on architecture, music, and literature. Oh, and fun fact, the Sultanate was actually the only Indo-Islamic state to ever enthrone a female ruler, Razia Sultana.
And that brings us right to the early modern period and the absolute grand syncretists themselves, the Mughal Empire.
Founded in 1526 by Babur, who famously swept right across the Khyber Pass, the Mughals were what historians call a gunpowder empire, and they took cultural synthesis and sheer administrative scale to unprecedented heights. It's fascinating to look at the details of early miniature paintings, like the one showing Babur supervising his gardens. It shows exactly how the Mughals took elegant Persianate cultural forms and planted them right into the Indian environment. It was the start of a brilliant new aesthetic legacy, one that fully celebrated internal pluralism and regional cross-fertilization.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute pinnacle of that artistic legacy. Built under Shah Jahan around 1648, the Taj Mahal stands as the ultimate jewel of Indo-Saracenic architectural fusion. It perfectly, seamlessly blends Turco-Persian traditions with ancient Indian styles into something entirely unique, universally recognized, and breathtakingly beautiful.
But their global dominance wasn't just about beautiful architecture. It was built on deeply pragmatic institutional pillars, primarily engineered by Emperor Akbar. He was a genius at this. He created inclusive elites through strategic alliances and marriages with Hindu Rajputs. He fostered religious harmony by literally rolling back the jizya tax for non-Muslims. And he introduced this brilliant thing called the Mansabdar system, a decimal-based military and civil ranking framework that stopped local nobles from building up power bases to challenge him. When you combine all that with sweeping agrarian reforms, these pillars are exactly what turned the Mughal Empire into the unmatched economic powerhouse of the world we talked about at the very beginning.
Okay, as we move into the 19th century, the narrative takes a noticeably more somber, analytical turn. We're looking at British rule, the 1857 revolt, and an era defined by disruption and extraction.
British colonialism, via the East India Company, stood in stark contrast to previous empires. It was a system specifically designed to extract wealth rather than synthesize it. Impartially looking at the data, the reality of so-called imperial improvements was heavily skewed. Those supposedly civilizing technologies like the railway and the telegraph, they were built primarily to transport extracted goods and monopolize trade, not to benefit the everyday Indian. We see the rapid deindustrialization of indigenous Indian textiles. We see exploitative land revenue systems that force peasant farmers into crushing debt. And shockingly, by the 1860s, a massive 30% of India's exports was simply opium.
Let's move to and see how this builds up to a boiling point, the massive explosion of the 1857 revolt. You know, this wasn't just a sudden random event. It was a perfect storm of long-mounting grievances. Step 1, you had intense political anger over policies like the Doctrine of Lapse, which blatantly ignored the traditional succession rights of native rulers. Step 2, the absolute economic devastation of local agriculture and traditional craftsmen left the population destitute. Step 3, there was widespread social disruption caused by forced British reforms that entirely ignored deeply held local customs. All these immense pressures eventually collided, uniting an incredibly diverse population into a massive, subcontinent-wide rebellion.
The consequence of 1857 was absolutely monumental. It directly resulted in the Government of India Act of 1858. This legislation formally abolished the rule of the British East India Company once and for all, and transferred direct autocratic control of India straight to the British Crown. This marked the birth of the British Raj, a system that ultimately entrenched an even tighter grip and further intensified the economic exploitation of the region. However, out of all the tragedy and disruption of the revolt, a truly profound silver lining emerged. The rebellion had shown that Indians could unite to force change, and once that realization had been made, it could not be forgotten. The 1857 revolt forged this powerful, undeniable realization of shared identity. It was a united voice against exploitation that would fundamentally and permanently alter the future trajectory of the subcontinent, eventually lighting the path toward the independence movement. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to consider today. How do the layers of these ancient empires continue to shape the foundation of modern India right now? From the meticulous urban grids of the Indus Valley to Ashoka's moral edicts of peace to the breathtaking aesthetic fusions of the Mughals, and that unified resilience born in the fires of 1857, it's like a giant puzzle. I challenge you to look closely.
The living legacy of India's incredible 4,000-year thread of synthesis is literally all around us, continuing to shape the present day. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you next time.